Welcome to LDS Faith in Crisis. This is your host, The Birds, and today we are going to be discussing the question, is there such a thing as unchanging doctrine at all? So I guess we'll throw it over to you, Dad. What do you think? Is there even such a thing as unchanging doctrine?
Awesome. So that's a really good question. So, is there any such thing as unchanging doctrine? The answer would be yes, there is a unchanging doctrine. The second question you might ask is do we have it? In other words, do we know what that unchanging doctrine is, right? So, before we get to that though, what is doctrine?
I'll give you my guesstimate.
Yeah, what is our doctrine?
Doctrine, as far as I've understood it, is like it's the truths we teach and believe. It's the things we believe to be true that we teach.
So, I will agree with you.
Pretty good.
Um,
I feel like that was pretty good because
yeah,
it takes into consideration that we don't have perfect knowledge of all truth. And so, can
sure,
we teach something that we don't have? Like, ideally, doctrine and truth are one and the same. But
sure,
in reality, right, we're teaching
sure.
what we believe to be the truth. And that's what we call our doctrine.
Yeah.
Hence the reason why there's more potential for change over time than there would be if we had perfect understanding.
Yeah. So you brought up a couple of things there, right? So our doctrine is what we claim to believe is true. But it's also, as you just said, it's also what our understanding is of that truth. So in Article of Faith, I think it's number what, 8 or 9, where it says, we
Hmm.
believe all that God has revealed, all that he does now reveal. And we believe that he will yet reveal many great and important things pertaining to the kingdom of heaven, right? Which
Sure.
means that that's number 9. And which means that we are our one of our core tenets is an open understanding that we don't know everything, right?
Okay, I just want to clarify that this is, as members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, we claim to not to know everything
Yes,
because we say that the doctrine or we believe in ongoing revelation, right? And you can't believe in ongoing revelation and think that you have the complete truth. Like there's just those seem to be, well,
those
they
are
seem to be
mhm.
paradoxical truths. And then we can ask ourselves, is that true? Are they actually paradoxical?
Yeah, and they're not paradoxical because we believe also that we are given line upon line, precept upon precept, here a little, there a little, until you come to a perfect knowledge of God's economy, is one way of putting it, the way that he interacts with us. And so none of us at any given time, especially until we've been resurrected, have a complete and total picture of what is going on.
Sure. And by that, like it does leave room for changing.
Yeah. Now, if we were to know the actual complete truth of a given precept or doctrine, if we really did have a complete understanding, then it wouldn't change anymore because that means it would be complete.
So, for all intents and purposes, though, if we're going to go back to this question of like, is there such a thing as unchanging doctrine,
Yeah,
right? Like, we might hypothetically say yes, because we believe that truth is unchanging.
sure.
But if in practicality, like in actual everyday life, with how we run as an organization of the church or how we are moving through as members of the church in our everyday life or just believers,
Yeah.
like is it even relevant that if there is such a thing as this perfect unchanging thing, if what we're experiencing in everyday life is like this evolving understanding or evolving doctrine?
So it's relevant in the fact that you should, with humility, recognize that you don't know. So at any given point, we should, with honesty and humility, say that yes, this is our current understanding. This is the doctrine as we are been currently given. And so this is the way that we live our lives based upon that doctrine, with an understanding that it can and does change.
Sure, But again, to play devil's advocate, even the prophets have taught for a really long time that doctrine doesn't change. But then we kind of get to this space where it's like now we've realized that maybe that's sort of a pitfall.
Well, they'll say doctrine doesn't change, and the reason why it doesn't change is it's enhanced rather than thrown away. For example, when the law of Moses came in, right, in Matthew chapter 5, he gives a whole bunch of things that are different than what was before. It has been said, you have heard it has been said this, and yet now I give unto you this. And part of the reasons why he does that is because we've improved, right? Our society and our our capacity to live good or better lives or lives closer to the way that he would want us to live has improved. And so he gives us a greater law and greater understanding of what his words really are.
Now, though, just
Mm-hmm.
consider this.
Sure.
Not everything, not all of the changes are just added truths.
Mm-hmm.
Some
Some
of
are
them
totally
are
new.
taken away
Some are taken away. Yeah.
and some are new. So we're not just like, okay, these are all like I think people could get behind this more if it was like, okay, these are the things that are truth and I'm just going to give you more, but I'm not like altering or adjusting what was previously given. Right? I think where we really start to have problems is when we're like, okay, I know I said that was the truth and like that's the way that it is, but really,
But really, it's slightly different than what
really
you
it's
expected.
this now.
So
And
you want me to?
as we are expected to believe with faith that that is the truth. Now, I'm not saying that I'm a person of faith at
Sure,
times. I'm not saying
sure.
that I necessarily always have a problem with that. But we can't say that the truth is therefore unchanging and been teaching that it's unchanging this whole time, only to be like, yeah, we're just gonna switch this thing up over here. Like, I don't know.
I
Maybe we
mean,
should just admit that we don't know to begin with. I'm with you more on that point.
well, and we should say that our understanding changes of what the truth is.
Sure, but like for people who are just looking at that and thinking, "Oh my gosh, we're just splitting hairs now," right? We're talking about it in a way that feels good instead of like looking at things as they really are.
Sure.
Like, what would you say to that?
Well, I
Give it to
would.
me, Daddy-O.
Well, I would. What I would do is go to the scriptures, right? And we can. So why don't we do that? In
Okay.
in Alma chapter 12, he says this, verses what 9 through 11, which is one of my favorite scriptures on this topic. Alma 12, 9 through 11. And it says, and now Alma began to expound these things unto him, saying, it is given unto many to know the mysteries of God, right?
Hmm.
Nevertheless, they are laid under a strict command that they shall not impart only according to the portion of his word which he doth grant unto the children of men. So there's one interesting
Put that in
doctrine.
English for us.
Yeah, let's talk about that. That means that God reveals to people, not just prophets, whatever he wishes to. And some individuals may be given greater light and knowledge than others, and they are commanded not to tell anybody else about it.
Okay, but how does that relate to what we're talking about with unchanging doctrine? Tie it together for me.
So tie it together. We got to keep going, right? And therefore, he that will harden his heart, the same receiveth a lesser portion of the word. And he that will not harden his heart, to him is given the greater portion of the word, until it's even given unto him to know the mysteries of God until he knows them in full. So back to your question again was, say it one more
Hmm.
time.
Is there such a thing as unchanging doctrine?
And the answer is yes, but individuals have to obey God and in order to become so that they can receive that eventual unchanging doctrine. Line upon line, precept upon precept. It's a process. We move forward toward that unchanging doctrine. And until we get there, we recognize the fact that, yeah, tomorrow things could change. Now,
But if it's a process, isn't that process itself implies change?
yes,
Just
but then
let's just
again,
like,
so this is math, right? It's like math. I don't know. I know you love integration.
Oh, let's not. No, we are not going to go math. Give me
So,
simpler analogy,
okay,
Dad.
simple. Okay, right? So in math, we
Okay,
have a thing called an asymptote or a line that's going and approaches a given number, right?
sure.
All the way along that line, you're never actually reaching that number. You're getting closer and closer and closer and
So you're talking
closer
about
to it.
limits.
Yeah, it's like a limit. And so as we are learning and gaining knowledge, we are slowly, based upon our obedience and our capacity, gaining greater light and knowledge. And we probably will never hit that limit. In other words, the total truth until we're dead and perfected. So the answer is yes, the limit does exist. It's a real number. But yes,
Mm.
our understanding towards that limit is constantly and will be changing probably until the end, at least until the millennium at a given.
So I've got two things to say about this. I think that so stepping away from the debate, because I could push against you forever on this of like the
Sure.
number of things that I feel like have said that I could say that people would say about reasons why that's like splitting hairs, right? Because on one hand, I hear basically from what I hear you saying, it's like, yes, there is this such a thing, meaning you believe there to be unchanging truths that are eternal and unending, right? And always the same. And yet that that can coexist alongside our lack of knowledge and understanding, which requires and necessitates shifting perspectives and changing understanding of the doctrine. So, from what I hear, you're more arguing that our understanding of that doctrine is consistently and constantly changing over our
Yes,
lives and everybody than you are that the actual doctrine itself is changing
that's right.
at all, right?
At all.
Which, like, I can't say isn't true because I'm willing to admit my lack of knowledge,
Knowledge. Yep.
but on a practical sense, I think where people start to feel mistrust is from those who teach that that doctrine is unchanging, and then with the assumption that we have it. So, in my opinion, some of this frustration that I feel, and I know others feel as well at times, isn't so much with the idea that truth is substantial and does not change, right? And is like unchanging, but it's more the frustration potentially with um, those in authority who claim to be teaching doctrine
Hmm.
who are changing what they're teaching
Sure.
at the same time, right? That could be the prophets and the apostles, right?
Oh,
That
yeah.
could be the just your standard oak bishop on the corner or whoever. That could be a missionary. That could be anybody who is like arguing not only that they know the doctrine of the church, but they're also um and that it's unchanging, but that they have it, that they have the truth. We are members of Jesus Christ Church, Dad. We have it all.
But
Don't
we
you
don't
know?
but we don't have it all.
I
That
know
right
that
there is the
too.
fundamental concern is we actually don't have it all. The other thing to think about, you can ask yourself, does the Lord provide doctrine to his children in its complete and perfect form?
I would say no.
And I would say the answer is in every case, no. No. I'll say it again. In every case, the answer is no.
Well, and
God
some
does not
people,
provide the answers to us in its perfect and complete form. There will always be clarification and perfection to the principles of the gospel over time as we come to a better and better understanding of those principles until eventually we comprehend everything and it makes perfect sense.
the hard part is that we have scriptures like ask and ye shall receive. And so there are many people who would like to have the complete perfect knowledge who don't get it like most of us, right? And so I also think there's some level of like reflection on God's character that's potentially discussion for another day around this idea, because when we talk about unchanging truths and unchanging doctrine, inevitably it points back to who we believe God is and what truth is. um but
Well, one of the things that's interesting is this is really great because being a parent, you can understand this a little more. When a 6-year-old comes up and asks you about how does a seed work, I'm planting a seed in the dirt, Dad. How does that work? How does it come to life? You don't talk to him about the chemical composition of the seed, and you don't talk to him about photosynthesis and all of the germination process, and you don't go into such extreme depth that he has no comprehension about. You tell him that this is like a little baby. This is a baby plant, and you're putting the baby plant in the dirt. You're going to cover it up, and then you're going to put some water on there,
The thing
and then
is
it's
that
going
you
to warm
could,
up and grow. Yeah, but
God
but what
could.
happens is if you do, and you talk to him about the chemical nature of photosynthesis with its carbon bonds being broken to produce energy, he's going to go, he'll be because he won't understand. And so that's part of the reason why it's always line upon line. Like it says, it's in 2nd Nephi 28:30. He says, "For behold, thus saith the Lord God, I will give unto the children of men line upon line, precept upon precept. Here a little, there a little. And blessed are those who hearken to my precepts and lend ear to my words or my counsel, for they shall learn wisdom. For to him that receiveth, I will give more. And for them that say that we have enough, to them will be taken away even that which they have." So our understanding is like a little child in almost every case, or at least maybe you could say a teenager. Look at that. Not even as an adult in almost every case on almost all of the doctrines that we have. And yet we are told in D&C 21, I believe it says, "Wherefore, meaning the church, thou shalt give heed unto all his words and commandments in patience and faith." Remember that? He says in patience and faith. And the reason why, because it's like, he's going to make mistakes. The prophet is going to make mistakes. Did you hear me? That doesn't
Hmm.
mean he leads the church astray. That means he makes a mistake. And there's a difference.
Agreed. And though you have always expressed that opinion, not everyone in the church has expressed that opinion for very much long for a very long time. It does seem to be an idea that is growing right now, which gives me confidence in the
Well,
future.
there's a really
But even
fun,
that is a change in many people's understanding of how the prophet and the apostles actually work and how the Lord works through them. So
and here we were talking about difficult doctrines, right? Like you don't tell your little boy about, the photosynthesis, the chemistry of a seed. Well, there have been times in the scriptures where Jesus he got angry and irritated at people. And so he started teaching him the full doctrine. And it was like, we can't accept that. It's like in John 6, I think it's 50 or so, when he's talking about uh you have to eat my flesh and drink my blood before you can enter into the kingdom of God. And they're like, huh? And many of his disciples rejected it because they could not understand it. And then he talked to Peter and he says, are you going to go away? And I remember Peter said something like, to whom am I going to go? There isn't anybody else.
sure,
You have the words of eternal life. And you know what? I don't understand them. I don't get it. I'm not going to eat your flesh and drink your blood. I'm just not going to do that. But okay. Right? And so sometimes there are laws or commands that we receive that are difficult, that we may not understand at all when we receive them until later. And it was way later before the Passover kicked in and he had the Last Supper and he taught them what that meant. He didn't teach them it now, even at that time. He let them go on with that. Huh? How am I going to eat his flesh and drink his blood for a long time? So
fair
in
enough.
in our understanding, we have to have our humility about that understanding, right? You
So
know,
to wrap it up, unchanging doctrine, probably true. There is such a thing if we believe there is.
that's my vote. My vote is
Yeah.
yes.
And our understanding of that,
Is not complete.
Yeah, pretty bad. Pretty probably not on par, even from what comes out of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and the teachings
Absolutely.
and the
Now, I
truths that
will
we
add
have.
one caveat here. It's called significance. In math, we have a thing called significant figures. When somebody asks you, does 1 + 1 equal 2? Your answer should be no.
Because is it 1.1.1 plus 1.1.0001? Then it's 2.00002,
There really is
maybe.
no one, right? And yet we decide that those additional features, additional dust particles on the one, are insignificant. And so we can say one apple with its dust plus another apple with its water. There's only two apples here, and we don't care about the stuff that we can't even see or whatever that's on them. 1 + 1 = 2. And so also with the gospel of Jesus Christ, right? Is
Mm-hmm.
that yes, there may be more to it, but what we have been given is sufficient
Mm-hmm.
for the significance of what we do. So we have been told we are to be baptized by water. No one knows why. No one knows why.
I don't know why.
No one does. And yet we do it because it's significant. It's important and it's part of our covenant. There's a covenant ordinance there, and there's a reason why, and there's a law that's being fulfilled. And so, because we obey these principles, even though they may not be complete, they're sufficient for the restitution or the remission of sins, for our restitution to God's presence through the atonement of Jesus Christ, through these principles that we know in incompleteness are sufficient for our salvation. And that's why they may change, baptism for the dead. Nobody knew about that for a while. What about, I mean, they may change. God's name is eternal. That means his punishments are eternal, even though they're not eternal in duration. So things change. Our understanding changes, but what we have is sufficient for the significance of what we need in order to redeem ourselves or to be redeemed through his atonement. So yeah, that's just making sure significant figures come in here. Whenever you're talking about Revelation, right? We may not know everything, but we know enough.
All right. I don't have much to say on that one. I'll just let it mull. I'll just let it mull over. But I'd like
Okay,
to hear if our audience
sure,
has
that'd be
anything to
great.
say. So you're welcome to comment in our little on our YouTube channel. We also have an Instagram that I've been super inactive in. I'm sure we'll be hit and miss. This is sort of something we're doing on the side.
Yep,
But we're grateful you're here and grateful you're listening, and we'll see you next time.
yep. Talk to you later, man. Mm-hmm.